Hello, my name is Father Timothy Tighe, and this is our 226th segment of our journey of faith in the light of the cross. I thank you so much for joining us. We look up on our screen and we see the theme for this segment. The 7-episode chiasm of Jesus' trial and the 7-episode chiasm of his crucifixion revealed how the Father redeemed the world's disordered suffering and death into an orderly, life-giving exodus into eternal light and truth. We go on to our next screen and we read, "In the beginning, God's word gave light and life to dark chaos by creating the world in an orderly way." Orderly is the big word. "The priest in Assyria saw Israel's survival depended on the Judeans segregating from Goy disorder into ghettos zealously ordered by the Mosaic law. The Mosaic law brought order. Jesus' passion seemed a victory for dark disorder. The Father seemed to lose control and to abandon Jesus. Now, after the resurrection revealed that the Father was involved, John kept searching for God's light and order in the passion. He believed his disciples found the life-giving order in two chiasms of the trial and the crucifixion, the original 14 stations of the cross, which make it easier to meditate and pray. This is the chiasm of the trial, and it's alternating between outside and inside. The Judeans come to the courtyard and demand death for Jesus. Pilate takes Jesus inside and he talks with him, "Are you the Judean king?" Pilate goes back outside and he says, "This man is not guilty." They scream, "Crucify him." They preferred Barabbas. Now Pilate goes back inside and he has Jesus scourged to reduce him to a joke. And the soldiers hail him as the Judean king. This is the main teaching. They speak the truth. Then we go up the other side. Pilate goes outside again and finds Jesus not guilty. They scream, "Crucify him." And he says, "Look, behold the man." And then Pilate takes Jesus back inside one last time and he says, "Talk to me about power." And Jesus doesn't help him, so he goes back outside, and the Judeans get their wish. They get death for Jesus. We go on to our next screen, and we see the second 7-episode chiasm of the death of Jesus by crucifixion. And we'll just look at the first and the end here. Jesus is lifted up on the cross, and then at the end, Jesus is taken down from the cross and buried. And in the middle, the main teaching, Mary with the beloved disciple is designated mother of all disciples. Main teaching here. Now, 7 plus 7 seems easily pictured for meditation and prayer. That's why you want to see God's order, to help you meditate and pray about it. It equals 14 stations. Now we go on to our next screen and we begin the episode 1 of the trial. Episode 1 is outside. At dawn, they took Jesus to the praetorium, but they did not go in to avoid ritual impurity to eat the Passover supper that very evening. 29, Pilate came out to the courtyard and said, "What is he accused of? If he were not a criminal, we would not hand him over to you." Pilate said, "Judge him according to your law." They said, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This goes way back to Assyria in the 6th century. The Jews were not allowed to put anybody to death formally. This fulfilled Jesus' words about how he would die. Now, lifted up is very important here because the Jewish way of putting somebody to death, to stone him. But chapter 3, Jesus said, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so I will be lifted up." And then in chapter 12, he says, "When I am lifted up, I will gather all to myself." And they wondered, how can he do that? We go on to our next screen and we read, this is episode 2. Pilate takes Jesus inside. Pilate and Jesus talk privately. Pilate took Jesus inside the praetorium and asked, "Are you the king of the Judeans?" And Jesus said, "Is this your question, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate answered, "I'm not a Judean. Your nation and your chief priest handed you over to me. What did you do?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world, or my men would be fighting to save me from being handed over to the Judeans." We continue with the same episode. "But my kingdom is not here," Jesus said. "So you are a king," said Pilate. Jesus replied, "You say I'm a king. The reason I was born, the reason I came into the world, is to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Jesus answers that truth is the way he lives and dies to proclaim and reveal God's kingdom. Truth, Pilate asked sarcastically, and what is that? He hears it, but he does not really want to know the truth. We go on to our next screen and we read, Episode 3 is back outside. At this, Pilate went out to the Judeans and said, I find no case against this man. You have a custom that I release someone at Passover. Then do you want me to release to you the king of the Judeans? They shouted, we want Barabbas, not this man. Now Barabbas was a bandit. Sadly, the translators ended John 18 and began John 19, which hides the order of God that John tried to reveal. So we're stopping 18 and going to 19, and we think it's like segregated. It's not. We go on to our next screen and we read the teaching point of the chiasm. Episode 4, inside. Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged. The soldiers wove a crown out of thorns and fixed it on Jesus' head. Then they threw a royal purple cloak over him to make him look ridiculous. They reduced Jesus to a joke, but at the same time they proclaimed the truth. They kept coming up to Jesus saying, all hail the King of the Judeans, the truth. Then they would slap him on the face. We go on to our next screen and we read, and now we're looking at the chiasm again, and we see that the main teaching point begins chapter 19. We'll go on to the next screen. Episode 5, we're going up the right side and we're echoing how we came down on the left side. Pilate went out and said, I bring him out so you can understand I find no case against him. Jesus came out with the thorny crown and the purple cloak, and Pilate thought they'd laugh. Pilate said, behold the man, ecce homo. When the chief priest and God saw him, they shouted, crucify him, crucify him. They were enraged with craziness. And Pilate said, you crucify him. I find no case against him. The Judeans said, according to our law, he must die for claiming to be God's son. Now this left Pilate very afraid because the Jews had very influential people telling the leadership in Rome, he is insensitive to our needs and our people. You should remove him. And Pilate was afraid he would be removed. We go on to our next screen and we read, now this is episode 6, inside. Back inside the praetorium, Pilate said to Jesus, where do you come from? But Jesus would not answer. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate asked. Don't you know I have the power to release you or crucify you? Jesus said, you would have no power over me were it not given to you from above. Pilate is thinking horizontally in this world, and Jesus is thinking vertically between heaven and earth. For that reason, he who handed me over is guilty of a greater sin. John's words help people picture and pray each scene, and I hope you are able to do this. We go on to the next episode, episode 7, and Pilate comes outside. Pilate wanted to release Jesus, but the crowd shouted, if you free him, you're no friend of Caesar, for all kings rival Caesar. So Pilate brought Jesus out. Recall it was noon on the day of preparation for Passover when rabbis koshered strung up Passover lambs at noon. The lambs were put up almost like a man being crucified, and then they would take the sword and put it under the chest cavity into the aorta and lungs, and blood and water would flow out. Well, we're going to see at Jesus' crucifixion that the same thing happens to Jesus. He's koshered by the Roman soldier who sticks a sword under his chest cavity, and blood and water flow out. Very important. Pilate said, here is your king. They shouted, crucify him. Pilate said, shall I crucify your king? They said, we have no king but Caesar. They are so crazy with anger against Jesus, they deny Yahweh. We have no king but Caesar. So Pilate handed him over to them. I thank you so much for joining us for this 226th segment of our journey of faith in the light of the cross, which we're closing in on the end of John's gospel.